Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto became the 7th Hokage? The Konoha 12 read The Legend of the Retired Hokage Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto sighed as he laid in his bed. It has been a few days since the wave mission and he was seriously doubting his abilities. He wasn't even able to defeat Haku without using the Kyuubi chakra. And because of this, his claims of being the Hokage seemed, at the moment, a bit too unreal. If there were ninjas as strong as Haku and Zabuza, who weren't Kage level, he was afraid how strong an actual Kage level ninja would be. Hinata winced as she carefully stepped into her bath. She had just survived another training session from the Hyuga elders and her cousin, Neji. She really wanted to end the split that was within her clan, but each passing day, she felt disheartened at one of her final dreams, as she wasn't even brave enough to confess to the boy she loved, Naruto Uzumaki. She sighed in bliss as she felt the warm water come in contact with her skin. Daniel raised an eyebrow as he saw two important people in the elemental nation lose hope, so he decided to do what he did before, another reading. He had to choose carefully on what world they should read, or better yet, he could show the entire Konoha 12 the future. Yes, that would be perfect. And Naruto could even perfect his moveset sooner and realize the love Hinata held for him yet again sooner, a perfect win-win-win for everyone. Naruto and Hinata would regain their belief that they could achieve their dreams. Naruto and Hinata would enjoy each other's company sooner. The readers would be interested and he would get entertained. So he just snapped his fingers and began to moonwalk a little before he willed them to come here. With a flash of white light, everyone arrived. And Daniel made sure that they were dry and clothed, since some of them were taking a bath. Hey! What's the big idea? Naruto yelled, not liking that he was taken out from the comfort of his house. It was at this point he noticed that his fellow genin graduates were also present, as were their senseis. You know what, I ain't going to do Hinata's stutter, so just imagine her stuttering. He also noticed that Hinata was a bit too close to him as she began to turn red. Hey Hinata, what's wrong? He asked, concerned for her well-being. Excuse me, but why have you brought us here? Kakashi asked Daniel. The last Hitachi was concerned for the well-being of his sensei's son, hoping to take him on as an apprentice, but due to the self-centered council, he was forced to take Sasuke on as well. Not to mention the biggest fan girl in history. Sometimes, he really needed a drink. Why? To show you the life of the greatest shinobi of your generation and his family. Daniel stated, causing Sakura to get all glittery eyes. Face it, Ino Buddha, I am going to marry Sasuke-kun. She gloated to her love rival, who gained a tick mark. Daniel sighed, as he spoke, I am sorry but I am not going to show Sasuke, as I said the strongest shinobi, not the most egoistical one. With that being said, Sakura and Ino began to rage on how important Sasuke was and how could he not be the second strongest shinobi. With a snap of his fingers, both of the girls became quiet, as he also proceeded to create couches. You all will read this, and hopefully stay relaxed until it is over. He stated as he also produced some food from thin air. Kakashi looked around as he saw that the couches had names on them. So after finding his seat, he noticed that Kurenai was also seated beside him. He also looked for Naruto and noticed that he was sitting beside Hinata, who was slowly eating cinnamon buns. Kurenai also noticed this and smiled. Seems like her daughter figure was in heaven right now. Asuma picked up the book as a huge screen also developed right in front and images began to play. Naruto Uzumaki. A tall man who a far amount over 6 foot tall. Naruto was a man of the age 31 years old, and a handsome man at that. Naruto was impressed how much he had grown. I look good, don't I Hinata? He asked his couch mate, but after seeing no reply he turned to find that Hinata had a deep blush, like an extremely deep blush, and was smiling looking at him. No, this can't be. Sakura raged on in her mind. Naruto was supposed to be the dead last of the bunch, he wasn't supposed to grow to become such a hunk. Shikamaru also spoke out. Troublesome, seems like that he was telling the truth. He was well muscled, having fully developed in all of the right areas, and his workouts keeping his body firm and ripped. Hinata began to drool, as Naruto grew concerned for her. It was at this point Hinata noticed that she was drooling. Ah, sorry Naruto-kun. Naruto noticed that she had added kun at the end of his name. It was also at this point that he remembered that Hinata had been the only girl not to insult or make fun of him. And the fact that she wasn't attracted to Sasuke was a plus. He had tanned skin, a shade of peach that people found attractive, and bright sunny blonde hair that he kept rather short after he grew up. He didn't want to keep having longer hair, because he himself didn't want to be seen as a clone of his own father. Naruto perked up after that. So at some point in the future, he learned who his father was. He couldn't wait for that. He began to get all giddy as he thought how his parents would look like. Hinata noticed that and smiled for her crush. Both Kakashi and Kurenai raised an eye, wondering how Naruto would react when he learnt his parents' name. There was no point in having long hair. He had ocean blue eyes, and on each of his cheeks were 3 whisker marks. Naruto wore a orange jacket with black stripes at the bottom linings of the jacket and the sleeves of the jacket, and he wore black pants with blank combat sandals, armored all the way up to his shins. Hinata blushed again, an action which was caught by Naruto, who also blushed at the prospect of having Hinata as a girlfriend. Ino was impressed with the way Naruto was dressed. She always was disgusted with the eyesore he wore, but due to her love and devotion to the Uchiha, she didn't even bother helping him. On his back and over his shoulders was a cloak, white with red flames at the bottom, with the title 7th Hokage, written in kanji. Naruto got shocked at the revelation. He finally was the Hokage. He stood up as he whooped for joy, bringing Hinata into a huge hug. Poor girl was so flustered and happy at the same time. She was being hugged by her crush. Both Sasuke and Sakura were shocked. They never really expected the Dobi to actually achieve his dream. Neji was also shocked. He had met the blonde earlier and from Hinata-sama's ramblings. He thought that he would remain a weakling all his life, as was his destiny, but to his surprise, he actually became the Hokage. Maybe fate wasn't written in stone. Like his jacket said, he was the 7th Hokage of Konoha, son of the 4th Hokage, student of the 6th Hokage, related to the 1st, 2nd, and 5th Hokage thanks to what his clan was, and surrogate grandson of the 3rd Hokage. In some way he was related to all of the Hokage before him. Naruto, after hearing that, was in shock. He was the son of the 4th, who had sealed the demon within him. He really needed to think this through. Hinata was surprised. She had just learned that the boy she really liked was the son of the man who had defeated the Kyuubi. Kurenai was also shocked to learn that the man sitting beside her became the 6th Hokage. Hoping to see a reaction from the man, she looked at him. "What?" Kakashi asked the relatively new Jonin. Kurenai just blushed on seeing the lone eye of Kakashi staring at her. Nothing. Standing in front of him was a man in his later 20s, Konohamaru Sarutobi, another rather handsome young man with brown hair, wearing the normal Jonin uniform of the village. Ino and Sakura blushed at the sight of the grandson of the 3rd. He had obviously grown very well. Asuma smiled on seeing his nephew in the future. A sign that everything was fine. A man who was currently the Jonin sensei of the current Team 7, though that wouldn't be lasting much longer. He was related to the 3rd Hokage by blood, and he was well known throughout the village. His parents had been Anbu serving the Hokage, and his uncle had been a famous ninja from the 12 Guardians. He was an elite ninja himself, and at one point in time Naruto had taken him as an apprentice himself. Naruto whooped in joy, seeing Konohamaru achieve the status of Jonin. All Hokage seemed to be related to a previous Kage in some way. You can't be serious. 7th. Konohamaru said in shock as he looked at his friend in shock. Almost everyone called him 7th, only a few of his friends still called him his name, and his family did. It was considered disrespectful, even for friends, to call a Kage by their given or family name. So most people, even closer friends, would call the Hokage by their title. Hokage-sama, Lord 7th, Lord Hokage, he was used to people calling him that by now. One of the perks of being the Hokage. Asuma mumbled. His relations with his father had been negatively affected when Hiruzen became the Hokage. Kakashi nodded to that. When his sensei became the Hokage, Minato had literally teach Kakashi that he was allowed to call him Minato. He became sick of being called the Hokage all the time. I'm dead serious, Konohamaru. I'm stepping down as Hokage, and naming you my official successor. Konoha is prospering now, and I wish to watch my children grow up. It has been a good few years, and I have done a great many things in my time as Hokage. There is limit to how long I have to be Hokage. Naruto told his friend with a smile on his face. After the newest threat to the world had been taken care of, and he having been reconnected with his son after the whole ordeal, Hinata went into shock as she learned that Naruto had a son. She hoped that she would be Naruto's wife. I have a son, Naruto mumbled, since he had the opportunity to ensure that his son wouldn't face what he had to face. He realized that his duties as Hokage were only placing untold amounts of stress of his family, not just him. Sure, they were understanding that the village was important, but they were more important to him. Shikamaru, what do you have to say about this? Konohamaru asked Shikamaru Nara, a man a little shorter than Naruto with fair skin and black hair pulled back into a ponytail. The man was wearing a full-body suit, with a tan jacket over it with his clan symbol, the Nara. This was Naruto's own advisor, who had been with him since he had taken over the Hokage position, one of his advisors. Shikamaru just sighed as the blonde looked at him. Troublesome, can't you just leave me alone? He asked the Uzumaki, who just shook his head negative. Hinata just giggled at that. Naruto heard her giggles and noticed that she had a beautiful voice. Why was I even chasing after Sakura? He questioned himself. His other advisor assistant had been Shizune, who had been the assistant of the 5th Hokage as well. I trust the 7th. If he thinks it is time for a change, I will support him and help groom you for the position. Shikamaru stated in a laid-back tone. If Naruto wanted to retire, there was nothing he could do to stop Naruto from it. Naruto had done great things for the village, for the entire world, as Hokage. Every genin were shocked on seeing how much Naruto had achieved for the village. Sakura, however, felt as if she just missed one big catch. The Fire Nation had flourished with him as Hokage, and the alliance between the nations had only grown that much stronger. All of the nations were flourishing. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. He was obviously impressed with the fact that Naruto had been able to do something not even the previous Hokages had been able to do. Sasuke seethed at seeing the success Naruto had achieved. Here he had been thinking that the Dobe would remain a runt, and now he was hearing that he was related to all of the Hokages and was one himself. Not only that, he even was the strongest shinobi of their generation. What do you plan on doing now? I mean, if you go back to a stay-at-home dad, everyone will hound you. They will demand you take back up the hat. The citizens and ninja of this great nation will despair over this. Konohamaru tried to reason with Naruto, who only shook his head. Naruto smiled. Finally, or hopefully soon, he will be able to prove that he wasn't the Kyuubi. And if his suspicions were correct, some didn't think of him that way, like the old man, the Ichiraku's, Uruka, his sensei. He hoped that Hinata still remained nice to him once he revealed his secret. Well, I plan on going on a family vacation for a few years until things cool down. I think 6 or 7 years should do it, and it should be nice. I am sure that my family will enjoy it. Anyway, Tsunade and Kakashi-sensei will be the ones giving you the hat in my place. Like you said, people will be unreasonable about this. Naruto admitted. He was the most famous, most desired man in the world. Everyone loved him, and he loved his people. It would break his heart to see them rioting over this, so he would be long gone with his family by the time they even heard about it. Using underhanded techniques, Naruto. Kakashi teased his blonde student, who just blushed. Hinata found Naruto blushing cute. In her mind, that was adorable. Naruto had already asked Sasuke to find a great dimension for them to vacation in until things settled down. Yes, a dimension. Everyone was dumbfounded on the fact that Naruto had asked Sasuke to look for a dimension. Baka, how could you ask Sasuke-kun to do that? You should be doing what he says. Sakura screeched. She would have spoken more, but under the cold glare of the Hyuga heiress, she felt as if she would get killed in the most unpleasant manner possible. Naruto noticed what Hinata had done, and felt slightly turned on. Not that he would admit it. He always felt attracted to strong women. First it was Sakura, but she plain insulted him time and time again in hopes of getting Sasuke to love her. Then it was Haku. He was 69% sure who was a girl, but she aimed on killing him for Zabuza, even though she regretted it. But now it seemed that Hinata had claimed his love-deprived heart. Not just a different country, but a different dimension. With Sasuke's eye power giving him the ability to take others to different dimensions, it would be an easy thing for them to travel to another dimension for vacation time. Beat that Dobi, Sasuke gloated to the Uzumaki. The ability to travel to different dimension was the power he needed. Daniel felt that he should tell what Naruto had. So he created a note explaining each of his new abilities. Asuma Kakashi caught the note as it fluttered down from the air. Well, it seems that Naruto has 3 advanced chakra affinity. He also had the ability to use sage powers. He can also use truth-seeking balls, which can attack the soul of a person. He also can subdue an entire army with Mangekyo Sharingan with just a glare and the ability to use the 6 paths sage mode. After that, every Jonin in the room was shocked. Guy then broke into smile as he laughed at the irony of it all. The kid the civilians had proclaimed to be a demon had gone to achieve the powers of a near-god figure. This soon caused other Jonins to chuckle. The Genins were however in shock. To say that Naruto had greater abilities than Sasuke was an understatement. The Uchiha was seething again. The blonde Dobi had things Sasuke needed to kill him. That power should be his. What about my students? Sarada adores you. Wouldn't she be devastated that you aren't the person to one day give her the Hokage hat? She wants to be like you, and she has the same wish as you did growing up. Konohamaru tried to say, convincing Naruto with any words he thought would work. Seems like my nephew wants you to stay. Asuma chuckled to Naruto. Of course, I am going to be the greatest Hokage ever. At the enthusiasm Naruto was showing, Kakashi and Kurenai were reminded of a certain redhead who needed anger management. If I come back, and you want me to take back the hat, I will, and Sarada is only 12. She won't be ready to accept this responsibility until she is much older. Naruto stated clearly. The excuse was kind of weak at best, not one that would work on him. Naruto stood up from his desk, before he placed his hand on Konohamaru's shoulder. Listen, you have been groomed for this role for a long time now. It was your dream to become Hokage. If you don't accept, I will have to find somebody else. I trust you with this, Naruto said, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Konohamaru rushed forward and hugged Naruto, Bro hug, and Naruto smiled for a moment when the hug disconnected. I accept, but what about, he's gone. Konohamaru said when his impatient predecessor vanished without a trace at speeds he couldn't track. Kakashi and Guy were impressed at the speed Naruto had. Even with his Sharingan, Kakashi wasn't able to track Naruto. Naruto had vast chakra reserves, and he had a lot of knowledge of using the Shunshin Jutsu, instant movement technique. He ended up using it a lot to catch Boruto when he pulled his pranks. Naruto smiled as he learned that his son had the habit of pulling pranks. That was a plus in his books. Hinata also smiled as she saw Naruto get a far-off gleam in his eye. She prayed to Kami above that she was his wife. She had always dreamed about it and it always broke her heart whenever she saw Naruto get beaten by Sakura. With the boy shouting it was unfair, no wonder Naruto had the window open. With Naruto, 1 second there was nothing standing in front of the Uzumaki home, and the next second Naruto appeared out of nowhere walking towards his house. His home was a large one, 2 stories in a large yard and even backyard. It was 2 buildings connected together, and a mix between modern and traditional in style. Naruto eyed his new home and made plans to gather enough money to get that. That seems cozy, Ino commented. She had been raised as a princess, much to her father's displeasure, and she expected the best from almost everything she got, let it be from simple clothes to the most expensive of jewelry. Naruto opened the nearly never locked door to his home, with Hinata always home. That being said, Hinata squealed in delight as she hugged Naruto, who promptly blushed on experiencing her developing curves. Wait, that meant he married Hinata. Naruto smiled as he learned that. He really needed to talk to Hinata once this part was over. And with nobody being stupid enough to break into the house of the Hokage and an elite Jonin from the Hyuga clan. She squealed even further as she learned that she was an elite Jonin. She finally had shown those idiotic Hyuga elder. Neji looked like he had to swallow a pill. He couldn't believe that the cousin he despised, the one whom he thought to be and remain weak, would become so strong. They didn't need to lock the door. If you were dumb enough to try it, you were dumb enough that you forgot that Hyugas were trackers and Naruto was the Hokage. Naruto and Hinata blushed under the praise they got from the book. Naruto took off his coat and hung it on the coat rack, before he walked into the living room, and his family was surprised to see him. Hinata Uzumaki, at one point in time Hyuga, was sitting on the couch with a slightly surprised look on her face. She could tell that the Naruto in front of her was her real husband, and not a shadow clone he sent to them. She was a fair-skinned woman, with shorter dark-colored hair that she kept cut shorter in the back with the length in the front being shoulder length, and straight bangs. She had white eyes without visible pupils, like little moons, and stood at a rather short height of 163 centimeters. She wore purple shorts, combined with a baggy lavender jacket that hid her incredible assets, her large. Naruto blushed at the fact that the girl sitting beside him grew so beautiful. Damn, he complimented her, obviously star-struck. Hinata heard that and blushed. The females in the room were jealous of Hinata on having bigger breasts than them. She was currently knitting something orange, a blanket or a sweater. Nope, she was making a stuffed animal. Naruto, Hinata asked. Being one of the few people to actually call him his given name, he would be pretty damn depressed if she called him seventh. Old man, his son, Boruto Uzumaki, asked in shock when he looked from the chair he was sitting in and saw his old man walking into the room. Like Hinata, he could tell that this was no shadow clone. He could just tell. It was the middle of the day, and Naruto was normally at work in his office, dealing with all of the village's problems, heck, sometimes the world's problems. Boruto, standing at 145 centimeters, was a 12-year-old boy who seemed at first glance to share amazing resemblance to Naruto. He had tanned skin, though a shade lighter, and bright blue eyes with bright blonde hair, and 2 whisker marks on each cheek. Yet, he bore his mother's face and the shape of her eyes and nose as well. His hair was naturally styled like a leaf, and he had an Hokage shaped like a leaf stem on top of his head. He was currently wearing a black open jacket, red on the inside, with a white shirt and black pants. Around his neck was a bolt on a necklace, a play on his name Boruto. The fangirls blushed at the sight of Boruto. Hinata and Naruto smiled at the sight of their son. They, involuntarily, grabbed each other's hand. An action that didn't escape Kakashi and Kurenai. Dad, Naruto's daughter, Himawari Uzumaki, asked in just as much shock when she looked towards her father. She was colored a lot like her mother. She had fair skin, though a shade darker than her mother, and the same color hair, but like Boruto's it was styled like a leaf. Her hair was shorter, and while straight, it flared out every few inches like leaf spines. She also had an stem Hokage on top of her head, unlike Boruto, who had his mother's face, eye shape, and nose. Himawari inherited more of her looks from Naruto, who got them from his mother Kushina. She had his blue eyes, and the shape of his eyes, and she had the general shape of his face as well. On each of her cheeks she had 2 whisker marks, like Boruto. She stood at a shorter height of 138 centimeters, which for her age of 10 was pretty good. Kurenai smiled at how cute Himawari was, while Hinata and Naruto blushed on the fact that they had another kid. Ino and Sakura squealed on the fact that Himawari was adorable. I must say, Naruto has produced such a cute kid. Tenten commented. She wore a yellow hoodie with a pocket on the front, and sleeves long enough that only her fingers were visible. She wore a yellow flowered white shirt underneath it that had flowered edges sticking out under the jacket, and she wore a pink layered mini skirt. She had a little bit of thigh showing, before she got to her long black open-toed stockings, knee-high, and she wore darker pink open-toed high-edged sandals as well. I'm home, Naruto said with a smile on his face, and that startled the fireworks. Himawari jumped over the chair she was on, and rushed towards Naruto and gave him a tight hug. Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder. She was always a daddy's girl at heart, but he was just always so busy. Everyone, except for Neji, Sasuke, Ino and Sakura, awed at how cute the scene was. Naruto frowned at the fact that he wasn't able to make enough time for his daughter, something he wished to fix in the future. Boruto was just sitting there. While he loved his father, he wasn't used to Naruto coming home early, only late. Naruto frowned at that. Hinata noticed that and comforted him. Welcome home, Hinata said, the least shocked of everyone. She was used to Naruto doing unexpected things. It was just so, like him to shock people with his actions. Anyway, they slept together, so she still saw him every day. Today she was just seeing him a little earlier than she had thought she would. Himawari stopped hugging Naruto, and she shot him a Naruto grin, which he adored seeing on his children's face. The Naruto grin, a wide toothy grin that was only complemented by the whisker marks of the user. With bright blue eyes, and slightly larger canines, the Naruto grin made whoever used it look like a fox or kitsune. Hinata smiled at the fact that the feature which was adorable on Naruto was also carried on to her children. Both of his children had his grin. Naruto scooped Himawari off the ground and held her up so that she was sitting on his arm, and she wrapped an arm around his head with affection. Welcome home, Dad, Himawari greeted him, while Boruto shook himself. Hey, old man, what are you doing back so early? It's only a little after lunch, Boruto asked his father, not understanding what was happening. Sure, when he was a kid Naruto was around all the time, as in, all the time. The only time Boruto didn't see Naruto was when he was on missions, and he finished those super quickly. Asuma raised an eyebrow at that. The fact that Naruto was able to complete missions quickly when he wasn't the Hokage was an achievement. I retired. Naruto Uzumaki is no longer the active Hokage. Naruto declared to his family, and Hinata actually dropped her knitting needles in shock this time. Himawari was just excited. She finally had her daddy back, while Boruto looked happy at the news. Tenten and Kurenai just awed at how Himawari acted. Sakura and Ino had to bite back a smile that was threatening to form on their face. Naruto, are you? Of course you are sure. Well, who did you pick to be the 8th? Hinata asked with a tilted head. Konohamaru, but I want you all to pack your bags. Starting tomorrow, the Uzumaki family is going on a long overdue family vacation. Naruto told his family, and Himawari jumped down from his shoulders and rushed towards her room to pack a bag. Bags, plenty of bags. Boruto looked excited as well, and rushed to his own room to do much the same. Hinata merely raised an eyebrow. Escaping the village before a riot starts, are we? Hinata questioned him, and he looked a little sheepish. Naruto also had the decency to look sheepish at the claims his future wife was saying. Caught me, the vacation is going to last for a few years. Sasuke found a nice little dimension for us to go to, and he will be here tomorrow to take us there. I was thinking everything should cool down in 6, maybe 7 years, and we can come back. Naruto admitted to his ever-loving wife, and she smiled in an understanding way. Okay then, if you think it is for the best, I have faith in you. Naruto smiled at the fact that Hinata had faith in him. Hinata said, and this wasn't just because she could never really argue with Naruto. They just didn't argue, they were mostly on the same wavelength, but she had trusted Naruto's choices for years and he had never steered them wrong before. She had total faith in his plans, he would never do something to hurt his family on purpose. It looks like the Uzumaki family were going on an extended vacation. Everyone smiled as the chapter came to an end. Daniel reappeared as he informed them of his plans. He also sent Naruto and Hinata to a separate area where they could sort things out. Both Naruto and Hinata came back to the place with content smiles on their faces. Naruto just blushed as he remembered how Hinata dominated the kiss. Kakashi just smiled at his student as they sat back on the couch. Sakura looked at Naruto with looks of anger. She had thought that Naruto will forever chase after her. The kids are sure excited. Naruto commented. Himawari and Boruto were rushing around the house trying to get prepared for their trip. Naruto and Hinata were just sitting on the couch together. Tenten just squealed on how cute and innocent they looked. Hinata and Naruto just blushed at that, while Ino and Sakura just scowled. They would look more adorable, with Naruto reading a book that Sasuke had gotten him from the other world. Yes, he read books and the newspaper. He was an adult, he literally read through stacks of papers larger than his body on a daily basis and he could get it completed in decent time. His reading and comprehension speed was outstanding. Everyone looked at Naruto, who tried to hide in his orange jacket. Well, that is unbelievable. Kiba mused, only to be silenced with a glare by Hinata. Kurenai was also shocked that Hinata was actually growing a backbone. It seems like she would have to thank the young Uzumaki after all. Hinata was laying back with her legs perched on his legs, and she had a book as well. Well, this is our first family vacation. Hinata commented to him with a slight smile on her face. She was excited as well, but all she needed to take were some clothes, her knitting needles, some balls of yarn, and a few books that she enjoyed reading. Isn't that way too less? Ino asked Hinata. She never understood why the girl liked Naruto. If Ino had the choice, she would have converted her to the true path of Sasukism, credits to Tearblue 1, but no matter how hard she tried, Hinata would never choose Sasuke. If you are with the one you love, you can survive on less things on vacations. Kurenai answered Ino, who lowered her head, thinking that she always overdid to prove her love for the last Uchiha. She wasn't that high maintenance, and as long as she had her husband with her she was promised to have fun wherever she went. She had fun with him, no matter what they were doing. See, Kurenai asked them. Kakashi only looked at the Genjutsu mistress, who promptly looked at the copy nin. What? She asked the ninja. Nothing. Himawari came running past them, carrying a lot of her stuffed animals. She had her rabbit representing Hinata, her toad representing Naruto, and her panda, which represented herself in a way, in her arms. She was searching the entire house for her stuffed animals, and she stopped in front of the couch. Okay. Ino had to admit that was cute. The fact that she had represented her family with various animals. Hey, why do I get the toad? Naruto questioned. It was Daniel who answered. Well, you do become the sage of toads. And above all, you also become the second sage of 6 paths. It all started with you mastering the toad sage mode. At the end of it, Naruto had stars in his eyes. Sasuke, on the other hand, had looks of jealousy. Mom, have you seen my fox? Himawari asked, and Hinata thought for a moment. The veins around her eyes bulged, and her pupils became more defined than before. Her Byakugan, allowing her to see in 360 degrees and through objects. Naruto gaped at the awesome power Hinata had. Hinata-chan, that is just awesome. Hinata blushed at that. She could see for miles in all directions, see raw energy itself, see into people's bodies, see if people were lying, see if were being possessed, tell if there was something tainting a person's body. There was very little that her Byakugan was unable to see. She had even been able to tell how much of Kabuto's body had been Orochimaru tainted. Okay. Even Neji was shocked on the fact that her Byakugan was so strong. Maybe he had to reassess his belief on fates. Maybe he could be free. Finding a stuffed animal was easy for her. In your dresser, honey, Hinata said as his eyes returned to normal, and she smiled at her daughter, who rushed off to go get her fox. The phone started to ring, and Hinata reached back over the table and picked it up. Hello. This is the Uzumaki residence. Who is this? Hinata asked politely, her nature. Hinata, it's your sis. Can you believe it? The 7th retired. The younger sister of Hinata, Hanabi Hyuga, the current heiress of the Hyuga clan. Since Hiashi had yet to retire from it, she was still waiting to take over. Hinata smiled, happy that her sister became more calm. Hanabi was just like her father during their spars, unforgiving. And they didn't had a good relationship with each other. Hinata really wanted her sister back. By seeing the future, she had high hopes. She was a very exuberant young woman of 26 years old. No boyfriend, no husband, nobody that she was going after. She was completely single, and had nothing better to do with her time than bug her sister. Hinata just palmed her face. Seriously, she asked no one in general. Kurenai smiled, happy to see that Hinata had a sort of normal future. Then again, being married to Naruto meant that nothing was normal. Yes, Naruto told me. We are, Hinata started, and Naruto started to signal her to not tell Hanabi they were going on vacation, planning a family vacation. Hinata said, confused by Naruto's reaction, not understanding that he wished to keep their vacation as quiet as possible. Hinata looked at Naruto with a pleading look in her eyes. Come on, this hasn't even happened yet. This only caused the look to get more serious. Ah, fine, she can come. Hinata gave Naruto a kiss on the cheek for that, causing the blonde ninja to blush lightly. Shikamaru just shook his head and offered a prayer to another soul lost to relationship. Awesome, that sounds amazing. And this is a family vacation, right? Any family welcome. Hanabi's voice hinted at wanting to come along. Hinata wasn't sure what to say, so she looked at Naruto with a hopeful look on her face. She wanted her sister to come along if all possible, and Naruto looked apprehensive of the idea. He loved Hanabi, like a little sister, the same as Hinata, but this vacation was supposed to be for the Uzumaki family only. Please, Hinata asked with her hands placed together. Naruto groaned, hoping that his older self didn't give in to the pressure. Please. Hanabi's voice was heard begging as well. Auntie is coming, Boruto asked as he walked through the room, completely in the dark of what is going on, and the internal debate that Naruto was having. In his hands was his "No Ramen No Life" poster, which Naruto got a copy of for himself and Himawari as well. Naruto nodded at the poster his future son had. He never understood why other people didn't like ramen. He swore to Tsukiji that when he became the Hokage, he would make ramen the national dish of Land of Fire. It was the family addiction. Even Hinata enjoyed ramen greatly. She was the only person to ever beat him in a ramen eating contest. The one with the timer didn't count because he could have eaten more than what he did. Naruto's mouth went to extreme levels as he heard that Hinata could eat even more ramen than him. Aunt Hanabi is coming, Himawari asked when she heard what Boruto asked when she herself walked into the room. She looked rather excited at what was happening. Hinata was giving him wide, hopeful doe eyes. Boruto looked interested, but he didn't really care one way or another. Himawari was giving him even wider, more hopeful fox eyes. Naruto cursed his older self for not having a better defense against this. He would have to practice for that. Hanabi was saying, "Please," over and over again on the phone. Naruto's eyes started to twitch a little, before he sighed. "Well, I guess it couldn't hurt," Naruto admitted, and Hinata smiled at him. He said, "Yes Hanabi, we are leaving tomorrow. I'll talk to you then." "Well father," I said. "Hello," Hinata said, and after exchanging goodbyes Hanabi hung up the phone, and everyone went back to packing their bags. Himawari rushed back to her room, while Boruto started to go through Naruto's collection of jutsu scrolls. "Dad, when are you going to teach me the Shunshin?" Boruto asked as he looked through the scrolls, Naruto's scrolls, and Naruto gave him a raised eyebrow. You never asked me for anything other than sparring, so I don't offer it," Naruto admitted. He didn't want to force his children to be ninja, so he didn't offer them training. "That's different, Naruto. I had thought that you would force them to be ninjas," Kakashi told Naruto. The Jinchuriki gave a shrug of his shoulder as he replied, "I am indifferent about it. If they asked, he would be more than willing to do it, but they never asked him." Boruto frowned for a moment, and tried to remember if he ever asked for training, and he blinked when he realized he never simply asked. He always pranked his father to get his attention, he never just went up to him and asked for it before now. Of course, teaching the Shunshin wasn't hard. "Wait, what?" Naruto and Sasuke shouted and looked at their sensei with critical eyes. When they had asked him for the jutsu, he told them that the jutsu was hard to learn. The Shunshin was a technique that allowed a ninja to move in nearly untraceable speeds so fast that you would miss it if you did, or didn't, blink. It was an instant speed movement, capable of giving even a slow ninja extreme levels of speed. The faster the ninja though, Naruto with Kage level speed even in his base form was capable of using a Shunshin with unreal speeds. In his Sage mode it was even faster, in his Tailed Beast cloak it was even faster than that, in his Tailed Beast Sage mode it was impossible to track, in his Six Paths Sage mode it was, well nobody had seen it before. He never even tried combining his Six Paths Sage mode, with his Boil Release, unrivaled strength, while using the Shunshin. At the end, everyone were looking at Naruto with shocked eyes. They couldn't believe that the dead last of the academy would go on to become the deadliest ninja. And he even got 3 advanced nature releases. Hinata just smiled as Naruto gained a huge amount of pride. Most ninja were taught the Shunshin, but to use it they had to vitalize their body with chakra. The longer the distance, the more chakra it took, and only a few ninja really cared to use it in combat. Shisui Uchiha, the third Raikage, the fourth Raikage, Minato Namikaze, and Naruto himself were among the few people that really used it in a battle setting, and had the chakra to waste on it. How much chakra does Naruto have? Ino asked her sensei, Asuma. Well, it's more than the entire village combined. It was at that point that Ino was jealous of Hinata. You know what they say about people with high chakra levels. The Shunshin Jutsu was partially used in the body replacement technique, but people didn't even realize they were using the Shunshin when they did it. Most people used a customized version, with leaves or mist or something. Naruto himself was so fast, he didn't need any of that. Why didn't you ask me when I was teaching you the gentle fist? Hinata asked with a raised eyebrow. She had been training her son in the Hyuga family taijutsu style, the gentle fist, giving Boruto amazing chakra control and the ability to push his chakra into people's body and attack their internal organs directly. And given the fact that he has Uzumaki chakra levels, it is a deadly combination. Guy commented, showing an unnatural amount of seriousness. He was a prodigy, unlike they had been when they had been his age, though Naruto had defeated prodigies, so the title didn't mean that much to either parent. A hard worker was always better than a prodigy. Dad, can you start my training? Himawari asked. Since Boruto was getting training from their mother, she wanted to get training from Naruto. Sure thing, sweetie. Have you been working on your chakra control? Naruto asked as he flipped through his book. Boruto took some of his elemental manipulation scrolls, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Boruto, you do realize that your mother has a lightning, fire affinity, and I have all of the affinities. We can teach you about your affinity without the scrolls. Hiba and Sasuke gave Naruto a look of jealousy. Why did the Dobi get all the good stuff? Naruto told Boruto with a laid back had learned how to use her lightning and fire affinities before the war, though she never really used them. He himself had gained perfect chakra control, and a universal understanding of how to use chakra from the Sage of Six Paths, as well as an affinity for all elements. Boruto literally had the best two people to learn how to manipulate the elements from. I'll say, Naruto, when you do, you should try getting a genin team. Kakashi told his student. What is my elemental affinity? Himawari asked curiously, and Naruto placed a hand on her head for a moment. He noticed that her chakra was like his, and held a right spiral in it, meaning that she would be using tight right spins to increase her chakra potency and amount more. He also felt her chakra, and noticed that she had a dual affinity. No way. He can just find out their affinity. Hiba shouted out, not wanting to believe that. Naruto and Hinata just looked at the Inuzuka with gloating eyes. Wind and fire, Naruto told her in a laid-back tone. She got one from him, and one from her mother. Considering the fact that Naruto also could use fire, it made sense in a way. His genetics were good, powerful enough to cancel out the genes of the Byakugan in his children, and they both inherited his powerful Uzumaki chakra. With that, Hinata was hopeful on their marriage. If the elders knew that her kids wouldn't have the Byakugan, then they would probably allow it. Wow, I'm not used to having time with him. Boruto thought when he realized he was planning on training alone. He was used to it, so he didn't even consider the fact that now he could ask Naruto for training. Now go pack you two. Naruto told his children, and the two of them realized they still had to pack, and rushed to do it. Naruto grinned for a moment, while Hinata glanced at him. So, I heard Boruto learned the Rasengan. Hinata told him, and Naruto nodded and confirmed it for her. Good for him. Did he learn it from Konohamaru? Hinata asked, with Naruto nodding again. What's the Rasengan? Naruto asked. Daniel played a clip of Naruto using the famed move of the fourth Hokage. On seeing the move, Naruto could do nothing but wait for him to learn that. Yes, my dad would be proud to see his jutsu being passed down to his grandkids. Naruto spoke with pride, his son knowing the famous Rasengan, the base jutsu for many of his own jutsu, and his preferred fighting style, an A-ranked cage level jutsu in difficulty and grinding ability. It was a powerful jutsu, though incomplete in its first state. That was the incomplete state. Daniel told them. Much to Sasuke's jealousy. Baka. Teach Sasuke when you learn that. Sakura screeched at the Uzumaki. Naruto gained a furious look, how about no? He replied to the pink-haired girl. Sakura could only look in shock as he refused what she had said. So, where are we going to be staying? Hinata asked curiously. She knew the plan was to go to another dimension, but she didn't know how they would be living. I had Sasuke take one of my clones with him, and that clone published a book series a few weeks ago. It is getting popularity really quickly. The Tale of Naruto is really hitting selling. Naruto told her. When his shadow clone had popped not long ago, he had learned that his book was doing well. The people of that world were really taking to it like fish to water. They really enjoyed an action, romance, comedy that his life was. It was a pretty thick book, and he had been working on it for years now in some of his spare time. Only Naruto can sell his entire life as a book in another dimension. Choji commented. Seeing the success of one of his friends made him think who he would marry. I see, and this money is getting a house? Hinata asked with a slight smile. Not really, some of the money bought some land. The fake papers are already finished, but I felt that building the house would be better. It will be easy, a few shadow clones, and boom, house. Naruto explained his plan to her. Hinata leaned over and kissed him on the cheek, agreeing that it would be somewhat fun to build a house. They could always get an apartment until the house was finished after all. So, any other plans? Hinata asked him lightly. Dad, which swimsuit is better, my yellow one piece, or my the pink one? Himawari asked Naruto as she came into the room and showed him two of her swimsuits, fully believing that she would need them. The yellow one didn't really fit her anymore, but he didn't like the pink one. It was a two-piece that had a hip cape on the bottom piece, and a flowery bikini top for the top one. He didn't like how much skin showed on that one. It was cute, and appropriate for her age in the fact that despite being a bikini it didn't show much, but his father's side was telling him otherwise. Naruto nodded his head, alongside Kurenai. Both of them really wanted Himawari to keep her innocence as long as possible. We can get you a new one when? Naruto started, fully planning on getting her a pink one piece in the future, but he was cut off. The pink one looks nice, Himawari. Hinata told her, and she rushed off to put it in her bag. Naruto had a sour look on his face and grumbled to himself. Hinata nudged him in the side, before she smiled at him. She is growing up, Naruto. Her body is maturing like a Hyuga. Hinata, her husband. I like her in baggy clothes more. Naruto said with a pout. Hinata had a C cup when she was Himawari's age, and Himawari was much the same. The girls looked at Hinata with jealousy in their eyes. Sakura and Ino couldn't believe that with all the dieting they did, Hinata still had the better body. Now both Ino and Sakura were thankful that Hinata didn't chase after Sasuke. She wore baggy clothes, but even then you could still see the outlines of her young developing body. Hanabi was one of the few Hyuga that never became that busty in life, while Hinata was the second most well-endowed kunoichi in the village, right behind Tsunade in her freakish breasts, or even on par with her. Who's Tsunade? Naruto asked as an image of the fifth Hokage came up. Well, for one, she is the last Senju, and your godmother. Daniel replied. Wait, so why isn't she here? Well, she wanted to leave Konoha, so she just left the village. Daniel replied. Naruto couldn't believe it. His godmother just left him in the village, not even thinking about him once. Your godfather, on the other hand, Jiraiya, is the spymaster for Konoha, and as of now, he is ensuring that there isn't any major threat to you. Both him and Sarutobi made a plan. While Hiruzen would protect you from all internal attack, Jiraiya would make sure there aren't any major threats against you. Daniel gained a soft look as he continued, he has been making sure that you are safe. Naruto nodded to that, thinking how his meeting with his godparents would go. She looks cute in the pink one. Hinata assured Naruto, and he agreed with her, but he still didn't like it. Any boy that wants to look at her will have to fight me. Naruto told Hinata, and she giggled at him. Naruto was never this overprotective over Boruto, but then again, Boruto wasn't daddy's little princess. If he was, that would be awkward for everyone. That is a little unfair, don't you think? Hinata asked him with a teasing glint in her eye. Nope. Nobody looks at her. Nobody touches her. Any pervs that get close to her are going to have to get a hospital room. Naruto affirmed his earlier words, and Hinata did not doubt them. Both Naruto and Hinata nodded to that, while Kurenai was impressed. She also would make sure that the little girl was safe from perverts. You know, girls are naturally attracted to boys who remind them of their fathers. I wasn't, but my father was, well, you understand. I am sure that Himawari will find a nice boy like you one day. Hinata promised him, and Naruto scoffed. Nope. Naruto rejected the idea, only getting a small laugh out of Hinata at how stubborn he was being. Himawari was still at that age where she wanted to marry her dad anyway, but one day it would change. Whatever you say, Naruto, whatever you say. Hinata commented as she went back to her book. Boruto came back into the room with two bags, a backpack and duffel bag. He placed the down in the middle of the room, before he went back to his room. Himawari came in as well, and she had a huge bag that was visibly filled with stuffed animals. She had another bag of clothes, and, well, all that was visible were her legs until she dropped the bags onto the pile. You buy her too many stuffed animals, Naruto. Hinata commented, and Naruto rolled his eyes. Tenten and Kurenai smiled at how Naruto was treating his daughter. You aren't going to pack a lot, are you? Naruto asked as he turned the page in his book. One bag should do it for me, and you? Hinata asked curiously, and he shrugged. Sealing expert, I was just going to make a scroll for it all. Naruto reminded her. It was the same way that he summoned his Fuma Shuriken when he was 15 and fighting Deidara and Sasori at the beginning. That scene was played. Up till now, only one major threat is present, the Akatsuki. And this is you fighting against two of its members. He was great at the sealing arts, but people didn't really know because he didn't really use the art that much. He had been the only person to realize that instead of bringing Madara back to life, that Obito had been using a seal to make himself the Ten-Tails Jinchuriki. Wait, Obito? Kakashi questioned Daniel. Yes, he is still alive and is the reason why Minato died. He explained, though it is possible to save him from the future as he is just a puppet. His sealing knowledge was rather extensive. Okay then, Hinata said, and they both got up and walked to their room as well so that they could pack. They were looking forward to their vacation too. That was awesome. Naruto shouted as a few others nodded to that. Well, some of you have to since there is only a limited amount of space available. With that, Sakura, Sasuke, Kiba, Shino, Team 9 and 10, along with Asuma and Guy disappeared. Now, Naruto, Hinata, don't be shocked. When Daniel snapped his fingers, 3 people appeared. Naruto and Hinata could only stare at the people who appeared before them. First was a blonde male with blue eyes. He wore the Hokage cloak, having the words, Lord Forth. The second was a woman with long red hair and violet eyes. She wore a housewife cloth. The third woman had dark blue hair with lavender eyes. She wore normal Hyuga clothes and looked an awful lot like Hinata. Hinata's eyes began to water as she recognized her mother, while Naruto snapped his fingers as he identified his parents. The adults ran up to the kids as Naruto and Hinata got pulled into a hug by their respective parents. After a short while, as everyone had been accustomed to the presence of Minato, Kushina and Hitomi, they started to read chapter 3 of the story. There, all sealed up nice and tight. Naruto commented as he sealed away everyone's bags inside of a nice little scroll. Naruto tossed the scroll to a surprised Boruto, trusting him to keep their luggage safe, showing an amount of trust in the boy that made him feel good on the inside. "So how good are you in sealing, Sochi?" Kushina asked her son, who gave her a confused look. She shook her head, swearing on making sure that when they went back to Konoha, the academy also included sealing arts, since it could save lives. Naruto looked at his Hokage cape for a moment, wondering if he could wear it. Despite no longer being the active Hokage, it didn't change the fact he was the Hokage, the 7th Hokage. The Hokage normally continued to stay Hokage, and people still revered them by their Hokage status. When Sarutobi-sama retired from the Hokage position, he still wore the Hokage cloak. Minato told his son, "Then again, it is up to the X-Cage." His own father always wore his Hokage cloak, though he was dead. "That's a mood killer," Kakashi commented awkwardly, causing Kurenai to look at him strangely. The 3rd Hokage had still worn the robes even when he wasn't Hokage, and Kakashi still wore his 6th Hokage robes despite no longer being the active Kage. Seeing that his student also became the Hokage, Minato smiled, knowing that at least one of his students remained safe. Naruto grabbed it, before he draped it over his shoulders with a grin on his face. It was good to know that he would still wear it, and it felt good to wear anyway. "That's true," Hitomi commented. "I remember Kushina accidentally wearing the cloak and she didn't wanted to give it back to Minato." She ended with a laugh. Kushina blushed deeply at that. "Hitomi, you promised never to talk about that." "I crossed my fingers," she replied smugly. "So, when is Sasuke going to be here?" Hinata asked as she stood next to her sister, Hanabi Hyuga. Hitomi hummed on seeing her second daughter. She never got the chance to see her, seeing that Hitomi died shortly after childbirth. Hanabi, unlike Hinata, had dark brown hair and her skin was a shade darker than even Naruto's, but still peach-colored. She had the same eyes as her sister, but her entire body was that of a petite frame. She lacked any real beasts when it came to size, even her niece Himawari was larger-chested. Naruto snickered. "Shots fired," he mumbled, though only Kakashi heard it. The copycat had to admit, that was an insult to injury. Though Himawari was a solid C-cup despite her young age, she had cut her long hair short, the same way she wore it when she was 11 actually, a lot like the hair Hinata had, only more ragged. She wore a one-piece purple bodysuit, with a tanned jacket over it with the Hyuga crest on it. Hitomi gave a brief nod, happy that her second daughter wasn't letting this be a problem for her and still tried to remain beautiful. She also had a large vacation sun hat on her head, and sunglasses hanging off her nose. Most ninja kept many copies of a single outfit, and had only one set of civilian clothes to wear. They didn't need the variation in outfits, not when they found one that fit them well in battle. They could go their entire lives just wearing their work clothes. Their ninja uniforms, because they could be called to battle at a moment's notice. Jonin normally wore Jonin uniforms, unless they had special clothes like they liked, and Chunin were much the same. Only Genin didn't have a uniform. Every wizened ninja nodded. They knew how to be ready at a moment's notice, since their career required a lot of quick thinking and fast actions. Naruto had no uniform, but that was because he was Hokage. "Sasuke-sensei better hurry up," Boruto said with crossed arms. "Wait, Sasuke teaches my son. Naruto asked Daniel, who was busy eating a burger. Well, only recently, he replied, not liking waiting. He didn't notice as Hanabi reached out and pinched his cheek, but yelped and fell onto his butt when he felt it. Hinata smiled as her sister acted more carefree and not like a strict Hyuga. You are so much like your papa when he was your age, both of you are so impatient, though he isn't really patient now. Right, big brother? Hanabi asked when she looked at Naruto tapping his foot. Naruto blushed as everyone looked at him. It wasn't his fault that he was impatient. Blame it on his Uzumaki genes. Well, you are like that. Minato teased Kushina, who gave a heated glare to her husband. What do you mean by that? Naruto asked his parents. Well, your Ka-san was just as, if not more, impatient as you were when she was younger. Minato told his son, much to the agony of his wife, who wanted to maintain her badass image in front of everyone. Technically, he was her big brother now after marrying her sister, and it was in her personality to call him as such. Oh, I'm just wondering where the bastard is, Naruto said as he stopped tapping his foot. Unlike Naruto, whose chakra could be felt from entire countries away or across dimensions. If it was any more possible, Naruto's eyes would have grown more wide as he learned more of his future self's abilities. Beat that Sasuke. If he was using an absurd amount of chakra, Sasuke had told Naruto he had been able to sense his chakra when he was fighting Kagaya, and Sasuke was trapped a few dimensions away. Naruto scratched his head. Who's Kagaya? Well, in a manner, your grandmother, as you are the reincarnation of her grandson, Ashura. Daniel replied, leaving Naruto shocked. Sasuke wasn't like that. His chakra was more silent. It stayed in the shadows, and was harder to sense. Naruto closed his eyes, before he absorbed natural energy and combined it with his chakra, forming Senjutsu chakra. Naruto gained orange rings around his eyes, before his blue eyes turned yellow with bar pupils. This form is the perfected sage mode, the closest one being of Jiraiya's. Daniel told Naruto, who was inspecting his eyes. Well, I could do without the makeup. Naruto commented, so what can I do with this? He asked. With that, a paper came into his hand. That will explain everything once this chapter is over. Sasuke wasn't that far away, but he was taking his time walking. Naruto growled at that. Sasuke was still acting like a prick. The bastard was keeping them waiting on purpose. He must not like the fact that Naruto was retiring either and want to see if Naruto would change his mind. Or he was pissed that he wasn't picked for the position of Hokage, despite the fact they were best friends. Nobody in the village would accept Sasuke as Hokage though, it was a simple fact. With his criminal record, and the way nobody really forgot what he did, the village would mutiny the second he was placed in office. What did he do? Kakashi asked. In an instant, all transgressions of the last loyal Uchiha was displayed, including his fights with Naruto at the Valley of the End, where both of them lost their arms. Uncle bastard, Himawari thought after a moment with a smile on her face. Naruto grinned, and he didn't even know why he grinned. He just had a moment of complete happiness, and he didn't know why. Both Naruto and Kushina were on the floor, laughing. It was amazing. It truly was amazing. Naruto let Sage Mode fade away, and Sasuke showed up moments later. Sasuke was a tall man, a few inches shorter than Naruto. But then again Naruto was one of the tallest people in the village. Sasuke had flat to his head, black hair and only his right onyx-colored eye was showing. He wore a black cloak covering his entire body, and a gray vest underneath it with a white shirt. Unlike Naruto, who had his missing arm replaced long ago, Sasuke never got a replacement arm and was missing his left one. He had a sword at his side, a Kusanagi sword with extremely high cutting ability, only further enhanced after years of Sasuke using his lightning release with it. Kakashi raised an eye, learning that Sasuke had the same affinity as he did. His eye also widened when he heard the name of the sword Orochimaru used. So it was simple, Sasuke betrayed the village to join Orochimaru. 7th. Sasuke said, because even he called Naruto by his title these days. His onyx eye shifted into a red one, and it had 3 tomo around the pupil like a wheel. Yo Sasuke, you ready? Naruto asked with a light grin on his face. Sasuke didn't grin, he only had a serious face. They are all consumed in purple chakra in the shape of a large armored head, before reality around them warped. What was that? Hinata asked no one in particular. That was a combined use of Kamui and Susanoo. Daniel replied. Then things soon changed rapidly, everything going from the Hidden Leaf Village, to a beach area overlooking the ocean. Sasuke was already gone, having returned back to their home dimension. Naruto grinned to himself, before he waved his arms. And Sasuke says I am impatient. Naruto huffed, only to be comforted by Hinata, who grabbed his hands. This caused Naruto to blush. Wow, that is some beautiful water. Hanabi called out as she interrupted him, and Naruto deflated. Really nice, Himawari said with a lighter smile, and she looked over the ocean. Naruto twitched at how he was being ignored, before Hinata held onto his hand, and he calmed down with a smile. Minato hummed. It seemed that the need for attention that Kushina had was also developed by their son. Then again, he was ignored by most of his peers. You know what everyone, go swimming. Have some fun, Naruto told his family as he caught the scroll given back to him by Boruto and unsealed everyone's swimsuits. Naruto tossed them to their respective owners, a orange one-piece for Hinata, the pink frilly flower bikini for Himawari. Hanabi with her skimpy purple swimsuit. Boruto had himself regular black swim trunks, the same with Naruto. Himawari, not caring if her family saw her, plainly stripped out of her clothes without any problems and changed into her swimsuit. Hinata didn't seem that worried either, they were all family, and bathing with her children in the past left her immune to shame around them. It helped that the only other people around were Naruto, her husband, and Hanabi, her sister. Boruto was like Himawari, and like his father, and simply lacked a sense of shame and got changed into his swimming suit. Hanabi got changed quicker than the others, while all Naruto had to do was strip to his boxers and put his trunks on over them. Hinata and Naruto were blushing at the fact that they saw their future part change clothes without any reservations. What was more amusing was that both Hitomi and Kushina were smirking at the misfortune the two genins were having at the moment. Naruto sat down in the sand with a grin on his face, and he started to unwrap the bandages around his arm. He would let his arm breathe a little, normally he never took the bandages off, ever. Naruto was curious as to what the bandages hid. He knew that he lost his arm during his final fight with Sasuke. They were extremely durable bandages, and could withstand a lot of abuse. They had over the years, and the white flesh underneath looked like a mirrored version of his left arm. It looked just like his real arm, only white in color. Naruto looked at his arm for a moment, before some wood started to grow out of it, a side effect of having Hashirama's cells in his body. Nani! Naruto screamed out. He knew that that was the first Hokage's name, but that also meant that he had a dead person's cells in him. Don't be freaked, Naruto, Daniel told him, you are not the only one. There's Tenzo, Danzo, Obito and Madara who have Hashirama's cell in them. Kakashi already knew about Tenzo, or as he went by the name Yamoto now, but he was shocked to know about the rest. He made a mental note to let the Sandaime know about this. 1. He gained the wood release. 2. His healing factor was accelerated to the point that he could heal from most wounds in seconds. 3. His life force and vitality was boosted to extreme levels. It was like he was not only an Uzumaki, but a Senju at the same time. Naruto snapped off the wood, before he sighed and redid the bandages. They didn't get wet anyway. Well, they didn't fall apart from being wet. What's a senju? Naruto asked. Senju are one of the founding clans of Konoha, with the only bloodline ability being the wood release of the first Hokage. Kakashi explained. He looked at Kurenai and whispered, "We need to teach him some things." Kurenai raised an eyebrow. Don't splash me," Himawari shouted out when Boruto stood on top of the water and kicked some of it at her. Himawari couldn't walk on water yet, so she was forced to wade through it while Boruto dodged her attempts to splash him back. Kakashi hummed. Being able to learn water walking at a young age was quite impressive. He knew that in terms of potential, Boruto was higher than Sasuke. Anti-bomb, Hanabi called out as she tackled Boruto into the water with a wide, toothy grin. Boruto let out a shout of shock at the tackle, before he came out of the water spitting. Naruto jumped 200 meters into the air. Kurenai whistled. That was an impressive leap. Before he curled up into a ball and started to fall towards the water, grin on his face. Hanabi and Boruto came out of the water, standing nearby Himawari, and a shadow started to grow bigger in the middle of them on the water. Cannonball, Naruto called out as he smashed into the water, and the three were covered completely in a massive wave of water. Naruto stood up in the water, while the others were forced to swim to keep their heads above the water. He hit his as against the sand in the water, but it was worth it to see their shocked faces the moment before the water hit them. Hinata waded through the water, having finally decided to enter it as well, and she forced her palm out at the water. 8 trigrams vacuum palm, Hinata said as she sent a vacuum of non-space into the water. Isn't that a little extreme? Kurenai questioned, concerned for the safety of the children. Go Hinata! Kushina screamed enthusiastically as Kurenai looked at her, understanding what happened during the time Hinata was with Naruto. And she wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. And though the attack was invisible, the massive wave of water that shot towards the ground was not. Naruto ducked underneath the water and stuck his feet to the sand with chakra, while Boruto, Himawari, and Hanabi were washed away in the wave, pushing them farther and farther out to sea. It calmed down after a few dozen meters. Naruto raised his arm up, and he swung it with a great speed. The shockwave from his swing pushed a wave of water towards Hinata, and she jumped over it and landed on top of it. Minato was impressed with his daughter-in-law's performance. And given the fact that Naruto was able to make a shockwave just by swinging his fist, well, let's just say that the hopes Minato had for Naruto surpassing him were fulfilled. Before she stopped standing and landed in it. Nice one, Naruto told her as they walked their family swimming back towards them. Naruto pointed his hand at them, and like he did when he was 16, Naruto sent out a burst of wind chakra that split the water in two. Himawari, Boruto, and Hanabi flopped onto the ground when the water surrounding them vanished in the blink of an eye. Naruto stopped the flow of wind chakra, and the water surged on top of them. Hinata lightly splashed him in the back, and he splashed her back. I thought I was going to die," Hanabi said as she burst out of the water first. Boruto burst out of it next, and gasped for breath, while Himawari went last and had the least reaction, other than heavy breathing. Not fair, old man, Boruto said in annoyance, before the water around him was cut again and he landed on his feet, in wet sand. He grinned, before he paled when the water surged on top of him and sunk him once more. You're 1,000 years too early to challenge your old man, kiddo, Naruto said with a glint in his eye. Shockwaves, wind chakra, and other skills were completely unfair when it came to a water fight. That and being water-natured, Kakashi commented. He knew that, if by any means, no matter how unreal, Zabuza and Kisame played in water, the water fight would be unbelievable. Naruto picked up Himawari and let her sit on his bicep as he flexed. Hinata enjoyed the view, but she didn't comment. Boruto came out of the water again, but only the upper half of his face as he swam towards Hanabi. She noticed him, before Boruto leaned up and whispered into her ear. "Aunt Hanabi, wanna get back at the old man?" Boruto asked with a glint in his eye, and Hanabi gained the same glint in her eye. They were family after all, and their eye shapes were the same, because Hinata was Hanabi's sister. She looked at Naruto with Hinata, who was laughing a little, while Himawari acted like a pirate with Naruto as her ship. "Oh, that is so adorable," Kushina cooed, as she grabbed her son and made him sit on her lap. Naruto would have died of embarrassment, but since this was the first time he was being cuddled by his mom, he relished this moment. "Hell yeah," Hanabi said, and together they sank underneath the water. They swam towards Naruto, and Hinata noticed they were coming up behind him and glanced between them and Naruto. He looked behind himself, and saw them coming at him. They were reaching for his swim trunks, and he smirked for a second. Naruto jumped out of the water, while Himawari let out a shriek of surprise and flipped off his shoulder and into the ocean. He landed on top of the water, before he reached down into the water and grabbed Boruto's trunks and Hanabi's skimpy bikini and gave them and yanked them up out of the water. Naruto and Kushina snorted while Hinata and Kurenai smiled at the fact that they were acting like a family. "A weird family, but that were the Uzumaki for you." "Ah," Hanabi yelled in surprise. "Water in my nose," Boruto called out, because in surprise of the wedgies he had snorted some water. Hinata was giggling into her hand, with Himawari joining her. Naruto let go of both of them, and they belly flopped into the water. Naruto laughed loudly at them, before he hopped onto the sandy beach. Naruto called on the powers granted to him as Shukaku Jinchuriki. Naruto tilted his head, not knowing who was Shukaku. Shukaku is the name of the Ikibi no Tanuki. Daniel explained. After the war, the Bijus entrusted their power within Naruto, hence giving him their abilities. And the sand around him started to move in accordance to his will. Naruto raised them up, before the sand formed a large 15-foot fortress of sand. Naruto walked into the front of it, before he walked up the sand stairs and got to the top of the sand fortress and stepped on the edge of the wall. "Sugoi, that was cool." Hinata's eyes brightened, remembering the time her family went on vacations to the beach in civilian towns. Both her and her sister had sand castle making contest. "Cowards, come and fight us like a ninja." Hanabi challenged Naruto as she dug her swimsuit out of her. Boruto was doing the same thing, and Himawari joined Naruto. Hinata walked onto the beach, and didn't take any sides, just watching the shitstorm that was about to unleash itself. "Dad and me versus you and Auntie Hanabi," Himawari declared boldly as she stepped on the wall like Naruto. Naruto rubbed the top of her head, while Boruto placed his hands together and formed a small blue ball of spinning chakra, rotating in every single direction. It was only the size of his fist, but it was a beautiful sphere of never-ending spirals, the Rasengan. Minato's eyes widened at seeing his incomplete move. He wanted to add a chakra nature to it, but he wasn't able to do it since he was dead. "Funny thing about your Rasengan is that Naruto was able to complete it and create various types of Rasengan, some powered by the Bijus," Daniel said, playing a clip of Naruto using various types of Rasengan, and Boruto created his own type, the Vanishing Rasengan, which changes chakra nature mid-air after throw and vanish from sight. Minato was proud of his son and his grandson to do what he wasn't able to do. Hanabi's eyes bulged and she activated her Byakugan. Naruto held his hand up, and a human head-sized Rasengan formed in his hand, the true normal size for the Rasengan. Well, for him and his father it was the usual size. Naruto used a single hand and placed it in a one-handed seal, and an exact copy of himself appeared next to him. Naruto gave the Rasengan to the clone, and it went into the base. Charge, Hanabi said as she lifted up Boruto and flung him at the wall of the sand fortress. Cheater, Himawari called out as she jumped off the fortress and landed on Boruto's back, taking him down into the sand. There was an explosion of sand, and both Himawari and Boruto were launched out of it safely and into the water again. Naruto's sand fortress started to come out with a supporting wall gone, and Naruto was buried in the sand moments later with his torso sticking out of it. Naruto stuck his tongue out at the fact that he was always getting stuck in things. Hehehehe. Naruto laughed lowly as he dug himself free, and his children came out of the water without any damage done to them. Hinata noticed when a red symbol appeared in the air out of nowhere. Naruto was too busy goofing around with the children in the water to notice, at first, but Hinata noticed that the circle started to move around and people began to come out of it. What? Kushina questioned as that occurred. A young, 15-year-old white-haired girl was the first one out of the red thing. The girl was petite, with a flat chest standing about an inch taller than Himawari at 138 centimeters. She was light-skinned, and had bright yellow cat-like eyes. She wore a white one-piece swimsuit, and was holding a pink tube around her body. She had goggles on, and a black cat head hairpin. She noticed them, and her eyebrows shot up in surprise. Kushina also squealed as the girl looked adorable in her eyes. The next was a taller red-haired girl, standing about 5 feet 8 inches in height with the long scarlet hair with an Hokage on top. She had bright blue eyes and fair skin as well. She had a toned slim and slender body with wide hips and large breasts. She had a white button-up shirt with a single button on it, and a purple hip cape, covering what appeared to be a skimpy purple swimsuit. She had breasts about the same size as her breasts actually, something that surprised Hinata, and made her feel better about not being freakish with her beast size. Kushina hummed as she looked a lot like an Uzumaki. Hinata blushed at the fact that she had big breasts in the future. It wasn't that she wasn't ashamed at that. It just was that she felt uncomfortable having to hide it all the time, since she knew that if she revealed that, Sakura and Ino would bug her to no end. Then was a shorter girl than the redhead, with bright blonde hair the same shade as her husband. The girl had peach-colored skin, and a slightly rounded face similar to her husband as well. She had bright, vivid green eyes, and she was wearing a sun hat and a light green jacket over her swimsuit. Her long blonde hair had straight bangs, and went down past her rear end. She had a slimmer waist than the red-haired girl, and her breasts were smaller. She was a really cute girl, standing at about 5 feet 6 inches in height. Kushina again squealed at the fact at how adorable she looked. Not only that, with just a change in eye color, she could pass off as her daughter and Naruto's sister. After that was a black-haired girl with her extremely long black hair tied into a ponytail with an orange ribbon. She was a little shorter than the redhead, and about 5 feet 6 inches in height, but her body was even more attractive by pure measurements. Her waist was slim, her wipes were wide, and like all of those among the girls her butt was well-shaped, but she was wearing a simple white t-shirt over her body, and her breasts were huge. She was a little bigger in the chest area than Hinata was. She didn't have the ninja firmness that Hinata had developed with years of training or motherhood, but she was a fair-skinned beauty with violet eyes widened in surprise. Hinata didn't know whether to feel proud of that fact or blush. A distance back from them, coming out of the woods, were 2 boys. The first was a guy about the same height as the redhead, with pale blonde hair and a rather well-toned body, and all he was wearing was a Speedo. The guy had a mole under his eye, and was surprised to see people at the apparently private beach as well, and behind him was a rather, well, he wasn't the most attractive guy around. My perv senses are tingling, there is a very perverted boy around. Naruto thought as he looked past the sexy women, he found his wife to be than all of them combined. Both Naruto and Hinata blushed so deeply that both of them fainted. Kushina, Hitomi and Minato just laughed lightly at the fact how loyal they were to each other in the future. Kurenai looked at Kakashi, waiting for his reaction. She was surprised when she found none. Though as a man he would admit they were attractive, and he ignored the boy in the Speedo. He didn't know how boys could trap there in those skin-tight contraptions, but he was too big downstairs for them, so he wore trunks. Kurenai blushed at the implication, as she looked at the fainted duo and noticed that their parents were trying to wake them up. There was his target, an average-looking boy with messy brown hair that flared out at the neck. He had a semi-toned body, like he only recently started to get his into shape, but still had fat on him. It was at this point when Naruto and Hinata woke up. He wasn't out of shape, but he was not in the best of shape either. He was wearing swim trunks, and he was most likely the pack mule of the group since he was dragging behind everyone's things behind him. Naruto's face got a bit angry since both Sasuke and Sakura had tried on various occasions to make him the pack mule of the group. Thankfully, Kakashi-sensei was able to stop them. My pervert senses are tingling, Boruto thought as he looked around for the source of the perversion. His sensei was a pervert, Konohamaru, and had tried to teach him the sexy jutsu. He had learned how to sense perverts, though he already knew the sexy jutsu. Kushina looked at Naruto with horrified eyes. How did her grandson knew such move? Naruto, on the other hand, was sweating profusely. If his mother came to learn that he was the creator of the move, well, the results won't be pretty. As ashamed as he was to admit it, he had learned it when he was younger after hearing a story about it from his mother. The Hokage on top of his head was spinning like a radar. Everyone raised an eye to that. That was a bit different. My pervert senses are going haywire. Himawari thought as the Hokage on her head started to stiffen. She could sense a pervert from a mile away, with who her family was, and who the family friends were. Her ability should not be a surprise. It was like everyone who had whisker marks had some way of detecting perverts. A very useful ability, Kurenai commented. She had experience with dealing with perverts. Flying Hyuga tackle, Hanabi called out as she tackled Naruto into the sand pile behind him. Naruto sputtered as sand got into his mouth, and the brown-haired boy was instantly excited. Quote exclamation mark quote. He shouted out as he looked towards Hinata, who wasn't paying attention to him and covering her eyes as the bright sun shined down on them. Quote exclamation mark quote. The boy called out again when he saw the developing wrists of the, unknown to him, 10-year-old, with the white-haired girl around. It was warping his ability to judge age. Flat, the boy said with a little less excitement, but still excitement as he looked at the barely covered chest of Hanabi that was pressing into Naruto's head. Naruto, Kushina and Kurenai suddenly got enraged when the perverted boy made himself known. Skinship between family, nothing perverted about it, he pushed her off. Oh, this is a freak. Boruto thought as he went back to relaxing in the water, not caring all that much. Of course, he didn't notice where the boy was looking, just what he was shouting. He was a harmless pervert, the kind that didn't have the guts to do anything about his perversion. Naruto, nonetheless, smiled quite evilly as he made plans to torture the boy who perved on his future wife and daughter. Himawari covered her chest when a shiver went down her spine. Well, it looked like the group was starting to approach them, with the redhead looking the most curious about them. Naruto shoved the ever-playful Hanabi off him, before he looked up when the red-haired girl stopped nearby him. I'm sorry, but who are you people? The girl asked, and Naruto started to stand up. The blonde-haired girl behind the red-haired one gulped when she realized the large height difference between Naruto and all of them, and they were forced to look up at him. Naruto looked down at them, before he let out a loud whistle. Boruto and Himawari came running towards him, while Hanabi covered her ears, having been right next to him. Naruto laughed manically as he made plans to torture the people who interrupted his family time. Minato sighed. Don't worry, it will stop soon. He told Kurenai and Hinata. How do you know that, Lord Fourth? Kurenai asked. First, don't call me that. It grows weary. Second, I have similar experience with Kushina. He replied as Kushina blushed as that was true. Ah, you jerk, that was in my ear. Why do all dads seem to know how to whistle so freaking loudly? Hanabi shouted out, and Naruto placed his hands on his children's heads. This is Boruto Uzumaki, Naruto said as he tilted his head to Boruto, before he tilted it to Himawari. This is Himawari, and that woman over there is Hinata Uzumaki. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto introduced all, but Hanabi. I'm Hanabi Hyuga. Hanabi ended up saying to introduce herself. I'm sorry, but would it be possible for you and your siblings? The girl started to say, before everyone in hearing range burst out laughing. Kushina began to laugh. We Uzumaki have high life force, meaning that we look young for longer. In an instant, Kurenai and Hinata were jealous of that fact. What would they not give to have that? Though, Hinata drew a line at giving up her relationship with Naruto. That alone was worth more than anything. Hinata got up, before she started to walk over to them. The girl looked confused for a moment. With how young-looking Naruto and Hinata were, she had assumed that they were all siblings. Naruto stopped laughing, while Boruto looked at him. Old man, I'm going to go into the ocean and hunt a shark. Boruto told him, and Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Naruto's and Kushina's mouth began to water at the mention of shark. Ichiraku made the best shark fin ramen. Catch a big one, Naruto answered back to him, and the boy grinned and started to run towards the ocean. Hey, that sounds fun. I want in on that action. Hanabi shouted to Boruto as she followed after him. They were ninja. Even sharks were their prey when they wanted to go after one. An elite genin, not a real rank, but everyone called Boruto that, and an elite ninja from the Hyuga clan could hunt sharks in the water with ease. The fact they could kill the shark by sending chakra into its brain and destroying it just made it that easier for them. Hinata smiled as Naruto's eyes grew in adoration for the girl. Not only was she sweet, she could also make the best ramen if she could kill animals easily. Dad, can I go? Himawari asked, and the girls in the group in front of them froze. Old man, Dad, just how old was the guy in front of them if he had children that looked to be about 12 years old, though Himawari was only 10? That is saying a lot about our longevity. Kushina boasted to the other people present in the room who did not have Uzumaki blood. Why don't you build a sand castle, or dig a really deep hole? We might need the hole. Naruto said with a glance at the obvious pervert coming towards the ground. Rias Bushu. Everything is. Who are you guys? The boy asked, but it was obvious that he was talking to the red-haired girl, apparently named Rias. Good work, Issei. Issei, this is Naruto Uzumaki and his daughter Himawari Uzumaki, and those two swimming in the ocean are Boruto Uzumaki and Hanabi Hyuga, and that woman is Hinata Uzumaki. Rias said as she gave their names for them, but she seemed a little concerned about their very presence on the beach, and the big one filled her with a very deeply rooted fear, like she was standing in front of a god. Oh. I'm Issei Hyodo. Nice to meet you Uzumaki-san, Himawari-chan. Issei said with a bow, showing he had manners, to some degree. Pervert, Kurenai mumbled. She didn't have high opinion of people who chose to be perverts. One of the few exceptions were Kakashi, Anko and Jiraiya. She knew what Kakashi witnessed at a young age on the battlefield. She knew how Anko used such openness to hide her emotions. She also knew the Jiraiya faced many things during the war and used that book as a way to deal with the losses that occurred. He also seemed nervous when looking at the mountain in front of him. Hello Issei-kun, you are very polite. Hinata said with a light, motherly smile on her face, completely missing the fact that Issei's eyes were drawn to the large beasts on her chest. Hinata made a mental note to juken the boy on the face if she met him, and he did so. Himawari did not miss it, and she gave Issei a glare. "You're the worst, Tabara," Himawari said to him, and he looked broken hearing such a cute girl say that to him. The white-haired girl looked at Himawari with a surprised glance, surprised she was say that, but the light, ever so light smile showed she was not against it. Kushina smiled as the white-haired girl gave the light smile. She knew from the get-go of the girl that she was emotionally damaged. "Ah, how cute," a verbal tick. "I'm Akano Himahima, but you can call me Big Sis," Akano said with a wide smile on her face. Everyone smiled at the nature of Akano and how friendly she was being towards Himawari. Somehow Kurenai felt as if she just witnessed another Anko in the making. "Hello, I'm Asia Argento," the blonde girl said, still rather frightened of Naruto's intimidating stature. He had nearly 1.5 feet on her, to the point she didn't even come up to his chest. The blonde-haired boy came running over, before he looked up in surprise when he saw the family that were standing there. Kaneko Tuju. The white-haired girl, Kaneko, introduced herself to the family, but she seemed the most happy to meet somebody who, she looked at Himawari's chest, before she mentally compared their heights. She was a full cup size, or maybe 2 cup sizes, smaller than the younger girl. Her eyebrow twitched, before she looked at the mother of the younger girl, and saw huge beasts on her that retained a youthful perkiness and firmness that surprised even those of her friends. Genetics. What Kaneko didn't know, was that Naruto's mother Kushina had been hailed as the most beautiful kunoichi of the Hidden Leaf Village. Well known for her amazing beauty, and flaming temper. Kushina blushed deeply as the book complimented her looks. Minato just gave a small smile as he made Kushina sit on her lap as she rubbed her back on his chest. Those of the Uzumaki and Hyuga clans were known for their beauty and youthful appearances, as well as their well-developed bodies. "I'm Yuto Kiba," the blonde boy said as he introduced himself politely, while Himawari looked at his speedo, before she looked away with a grossed-out look on her face. She didn't want to, or need to see that image ever again. Yuto seemed a little amused by her reaction, while Hinata gave him a light polite bow. "Nice to meet you all, I am Hinata Uzumaki. This is my husband Naruto Uzumaki, our daughter Himawari Uzumaki, and our son is in the ocean right now, but he is Boruto Uzumaki. My sister is Hanabi Uzumaki. I hope we aren't disturbing you all," Hinata said to the group, being the ever-polite woman that she was. Hinata smiled as the book called her polite. Normally the Hyuga would berate her for being so, but her father encouraged her to do so. "Oh, there is no problem, but this area is supposed to be private." "How did you all get here?" Rias asked, because she was sure she had placed a spell around the place that would manipulate the memories of those that weren't supernatural and make them remember that they had to do something and go do it. Kaneko wasn't reacting to them, so they weren't devils, angels, yokai, or fallen angels. If she wasn't reacting then they were completely human. "We used ninja magic and teleported here from an entirely different dimension," Naruto commented dryly, telling the completely truth, knowing that they wouldn't believe it. He knew these people weren't human, so no point pretending to be from here either, and like he said, he doubted that they would believe him. "Seriously Naruto?" Kakashi asked the blonde ninja. Blunt as ever. "How did you all use that red circle?" Hinata asked, letting them know that she was aware of how they had gotten there, and surprising everyone by their lack of surprise at the teleportation circle. "Are you all human?" Akano asked, and she thought nobody could notice, but few sparks started to come off the tips of her fingers. Naruto looked down at her for a moment, before his whisker marks started to thicken and his eyes turned blood red. Naruto lowered his head when his future self used this form. Naruto only had experience with this state when he was fighting Haku. "Calm down girl," Naruto told her, and she took a step back in wide-eyed fear at the drastic change in personality. She was completely subdued by the man in front of her, who gave off the aura of somebody of great power. Naruto gave a grin. Finally someone who knew of his power at first glance. She wasn't the only one to back away, everyone backed away from him other than his family. They got defensive instantly, with the blonde boy summoning a sword out of a red circle. He held it in front of him, like it was going to make a difference. Boosted gear, Issei called out as his left arm covered itself in red scales with a green gem on the top of his hand. Kakashi tilted his ever so slightly at the mention of the boosted gear. Kushina's eyes shone a bit as the sword was summoned. If she could do that, then the war could have been over quicker. He moved in front of Rias, protective over her, while Naruto's eyes turned back to normal. Calm down. I don't want to hurt you, but if any of you attack I will hurt you. Naruto told them truthfully. Akano started it by showing hostile intent first, preparing herself for a battle. Naruto flared his chakra for a moment, and he gave them all a glare to reinforce the point. He squashed their intent to battle with that one glare, and they looked away from him for a moment. That is impressive, Naruto-kun. Minato complimented. Well, he did subdue an entire army who had Mangekyo Sharingan. Daniel added, making both father and son smile. Wait, Naruto Uzumaki, aren't you the author of that new book series? Rias asked in surprise when she finally remembered something. Her friend had told her about book that was quickly growing in popularity, with the author being named Naruto Uzumaki. It was about a ninja from another dimension and his struggles, and he fit the description of the man in front of her. She had a copy of the book, suggested to her by a few people who believed that the story had a lot of good storytelling. Well, thank you book. Naruto smiled. At least his life story was great. Yeah, story of my life. Now, are you all going to get out of defensive positions? This is a large beach and, Naruto started, before Boruto and Hanabi came out of the water pulling a large shark behind them. Naruto's and Kushina's mouth began to water more as the shark appeared and their hunger grew. Minato only shook his head and smiled. Naruto looked behind him, surprised that they actually found one, and that it was still alive, but quickly dying. Hey old man, we got one. Make a fire. We are having a shark fin ramen tonight, Tsubasa. Boruto shouted out, and Naruto licked his lips. That sounded great right about now, very great. Hey, nothing says sorry like having a meal together. You kids want to join us? Naruto asked the group as he kicked the shark in the head, and a loud crack was heard, with the shark no longer moving, dead. Issei gulped at the display of force, realizing that he wouldn't have won the fight between them if it came to it. Damn right you wouldn't have. Naruto shouted, still angry at the fact that the kid had the galls to perv on his family. Uzumaki-san, is it all right if I call you Naruto? I assure you, we are not children. Rias told him, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Oh, have you been through war and fought against immortal zombie ninjas with superpowers that could regenerate from nothing, godlike men with the power to wipe out the world, and a goddess who could create dimensions and destroy them at a whim? Have you saved the entire world multiple times, or do you pay bills? Naruto asked them with a raised eyebrow. Everyone's eyes widened as Naruto's accomplishments became known. Well, no, Rias admitted as she looked away from Naruto. She remembered reading about those events in the book. Well then, to me, you are children. Now, do you want to join us for lunch, or not? We can all have fun, ignore each other, or fight, and you really don't want to fight. Naruto told them, but he had an amused tone to his voice. Naruto, I'm sure they would much rather enjoy spending their time together. They came here together, Hinata said, and Naruto nodded to her. She was a very understanding person, so she would often be the peacekeeper when Naruto had a bit of a temper going. This place is a heaven of, Issei said, and Naruto grabbed his face and lifted him up into the air with a hard look on his face. Crush him. Both Kushina and Kurenai screamed, as Hinata supported them. She was really beginning to hate Issei, who didn't have any sense. Naruto brought Issei face to face with him, while Rias sighed. She realized that this would happen one day. The boy was an unredeemable pervert in every single way. There was always going to be a day that he got himself into trouble with the wrong person. You wouldn't happen to be talking about my family, right? Naruto asked while squeezing Issei's face. I'm very sorry about him. Issei can't control his lust very well, Yuto said as he tried to placate Naruto, who wasn't having any of it. Naruto started to drag Issei away with a dark look on his face, and he glanced at Rias and her group. I am going to enjoy this, Naruto commented as he began to rub his hand evilly. Same here, Kushina and Kurenai added at the time. If they got their hands on him, they would castrate him. I'm going to have words with him, and as long as he doesn't do anything to deserve pain, I will not hurt him, but you do not ogle another man's wife and daughter, Naruto said as he walked a respectable distance away from the combined group. Naruto dropped Issei on the ground, before he bent down to his level. I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. I'm dead, Issei thought as he looked at the anger of a pissed-off father and husband. You see those attractive young ladies, my wife, sister-in-law, and daughter. Let me tell you something, I went to the moon and fought a battle with my planet at stake for her. I fought a man that could cut planets in half for her. She is the love of my life, she is my wife, she is my other half. I don't hate perverts. My godfather, a man I love very much, was a super pervert, but he had a code of honor. You do not go after a married woman, understand? Naruto asked with his grin stretching to dangerous levels, and his fangs extending with his whisker marks doing the same thing. I understand, Issei said with a scared tone. Now, you see that little girl, my daughter. She is my little girl, my precious gift from heaven. Like my wife, she is also my life. I would go to hell and back, carrying the world on my back while dying of thirst for her, and with a smile on my face. If I catch you touching her, I am going to rip your arms off, then I am going to rip your left eye out, Naruto said as he moved his hands to his shoulders, before he poked Issei right next to his eye, and Issei was shaking. This was not the average man. Issei had never dealt with anyone like Naruto before, his only experience was with Rainer. Shit, 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 Issei thought with wide eyes. Perfect words. Kakashi made fun of the perverted boy. Not just that, but while you have one eye left, I am going to rip off your balls, with my bare hands, and slew Owly. Then, I am going to replace them. I can do it too. I have the ability to reconnect and regrow people's organs. It would be a simple matter for me to pluck, bye-bye eyeballs and balls, and then you will be seeing with one eye out of your head, and another out of your balls, and every time you sneeze cum will shoot from your nose, Naruto said to Issei, who was growing more and more frightened. The women were smiling demonically, while Naruto felt as he should have threatened the boy more. A pissed-off father was scary, even more so when you were ogling his young daughter. I am so sorry, it will never happen again, Issei promised Naruto, and he nodded. Yes, you can bet your virginic that it won't happen. You see, I understand you very much. I'm a pervert, I trained under two perverts. I was once a teenage, hormonal boy, but you wanna know something? I had girls from all over the world traveling thousands upon thousands of miles just to meet me, but none of compare to my Hinata, and little Himawari, she is my child with Hinata. I understand the male fascination with Reests and their bodies, but repeat after me. Naruto Uzumaki's wife and children are off limits, Naruto told Issei with a very forceful tone to his voice, and Issei gulped deeply and nodded his head. Naruto Uzumaki's wife and children are off limits. Issei repeated like his life depended on it. Now you see, love is something special. When you love somebody, you would go to hell and back for them. You would face any challenge, and raise above any mountain for them or die trying. If you can't say you would do that for them, then you have no right to say you love them. Naruto lectured Issei in a bit of a softer tone than before, and the large group was trying to hear what Naruto was telling Issei. Hinata and Hanabi were able to see and read his lips, and Hinata was blushing in a happy way. Naruto was getting some tonight. Why are you telling me this? Issei asked Naruto, who looked at him with serious eyes. Tell me, kid, what is your goal in life? Naruto asked him seriously. I want to become a harem king, and get my own harem of girls with great tits. Issei shouted out. Kurenai scowled. The most worst possible dream to have in her opinion. And even a short distance away Rias looked humiliated that Issei had such a dream. Akano was laughing a little, while Kaneko looked disgusted. What about the feelings of the women? Naruto asked Issei with a raised eyebrow, and the boy thought about it for a moment. I'll just love them all equally, and make sure none of them feel neglected. Issei said to Naruto, and the man looked at the boy with a furrowed brow. So how are you going to get these women? Naruto asked the boy, and Issei went silent. Not knowing how to respond, all he knew that devils who become kings would get their own peerages, but how would Get actually get his peerage? I don't know, Issei said after a moment. Are you going to force girls who don't want to share? Kushina scowled and wished that she had her sword at the moment. Can you handle watching a girl leave you, because she can't stand not having you to herself? Naruto asked the boy with a serious look on his face. Issei winced. The very thought of that was almost heartbreaking to him. He didn't believe he could bear it if somebody he liked left him for somebody else. He would go insane if that happened. No. But, no. Issei said. He was going to make an excuse, but he figured he couldn't do that. Figure it out, because your dream relies not on yourself, but girls who love you. I am not saying I have anything against the harem itself, but if you can't accept a girl leaving you because she isn't willing to just be a member of your harem, then don't even try and have one. Their feelings are more important than yours. Naruto told Issei. The more he talked to Issei, the deeper he could look into the boy's heart. And the boy was a good boy, but his perversion was making it extremely hard for the boy to realize that his dream wasn't complete. It wasn't enough, it was like a short-term goal. When he got a harem, then what? Increase his harem, have an ever-increasing harem with the girls getting more and more unhappy with each girl that got added to the group. The boy truly loved beasts. He loved them to a fault actually. He loves them to the point that when a monster, which was, appeared, he literally ogled the breasts rather than help his peerage. It was Kaneko who destroyed it. Daniel told them, anyone that compared Issei to Jiraiya was wrong, and Naruto would punch them in the face. Jiraiya was a pervert, a super pervert, yes, but he was so much more than that. He was a visionary. He was a loving person, and a caring godfather. He was a teacher, and a peace lover. He strived for world peace, and ending the need for hatred. He was somebody that was important to his village and his friends, a person that could smile in the face of death if he was dying for those he loved. He could kill his students, and he was capable of killing the woman he loved if he saw them turning down into a dark path that they couldn't recover from. He was supportive, and he put other people above himself. Yes, he was a pervert, but that was only a small part of who he was. Kurenai nodded. She knew of the pervert's life during the war, as it was in a few books she read. Issei was silent when he got back to the group, and Hinata leaned close to Naruto. What was up with that? Hinata asked Naruto, and he leaned towards her. The boy has been going on about. I figured he needed some help. Figuring him out wasn't hard. Naruto said to her, before he turned to the group again and smiled. Now, let's all be friends and let bygones be bygones. Naruto called out with a grin on his face. Wait, isn't there an Uzumaki dojo opening up in the shopping district? Akano asked, since she had passed by an opening soon sign in a shop before. Naruto, Dad, old man, Hinata, Himawari, and Boruto asked in confusion. What? I was a hand-to-hand combat teacher for the academy for a while. Why are you surprised, Hinata? You already knew about that. Before the Tonari incident I was teaching in my spare time. Naruto admitted to her, because he wanted to open up a dojo for a few years. He would have his children get involved, and his wife, and have fun doing a family thing together. Naruto and Hinata smiled together. Teaching their kids would be fun. You teach hand-to-hand? Rias asked with some surprise, and Naruto nodded. Yes. You wanna have a sparring match? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. Not me personally. Are you good at hand-to-hand? What is your level? Rias asked, and Naruto swung his hand as a storm of wind surrounded him, created purely by the shockwave of his arm. They were blown off their feet and into the sound, the wind strong enough to block even weapons, the same shockwave that he had used to deflect the weapons from the Shin clones when they attacked him. Naruto vanished in the blink of an eye and caught his kids, while Hinata caught herself and landed on her feet. The young Uzumaki eyes widened as his power became more clear. I am strong enough to protect anything I love, and that is all that matters. Is there something you wanted? Naruto asked Rias as she picked herself up off the ground, the same with the rest of her peerage. Please, I would like you to spar with my peerage. Rias suggested to him, and Naruto thought about it for a moment. Naruto finished thinking about it when he looked and saw that Boruto and Himawari seemed excited for the chance to see him fight, the same thing with Hanabi. Sure, Naruto answered her. There was nothing to lose, and who knows, it might be fun. Now that this chapter's over, let's relax. Daniel told them all as he began to make preparations to bring a few people here. Everyone nodded as Daniel created various dishes and they all gathered around it.